Well, hello Internet and welcome to my responsive web design tutorial. We use responsive web design to make sure that our site is going to be optimized regardless of what device we are using, and we're going to use media query specifically to allow us to create separate CSS files in this tutorial so that we'll be able to optimize our site for any type of device that might load our site. And in this tutorial I decided to create the entire thing all in one video, and I have a lot to do, so let's get into it. Okay, so you can see here the final site that I created at the end of this tutorial, and you can see also as I go and lower the resolution that it is automatically going to adjust. And like I said, I'm going to show you exactly how to do this in this video. So on the right side of the screen I went and marked up everything, and basically I'm going to use this as a guide. This isn't going to be a guaranteed way that everything's going to line up, but I always find that it's very useful to use like a grid type of system here on my screen and figure out roughly where everything's going to go. I then went and got all of the images ahead of time, and these are all just ping files, transparent pings for the most part, and I have those stored in the images directory inside of where I want to have my website. And now basically all I need to do is come in here and start creating everything. So what I did ahead of time was I went and created I just put this line of text in here, and this is going to point at the default style sheet that we're going to be using. And I'm going to need a bunch of these depending upon whatever other screen sizes I'm going to use. And for my next one, I'm just going to have to come in here and I'm going to type in media is equal to, and I'm going to say only screen and then here I'm going to define my minimum width for which I'm going to use this specific style sheet. I'm going to define that as 768 pixels because that seems to work well here, and max width of 980 pixels. Put a quote inside of here, and then let's move href down here, and then inside of this I'm going to type in style, and I'm going to type in 768 because that works out well. And I'm going to copy this and I'm going to create two more of these style sheets. The next one we're going to create is going to have a minimum width of 600 pixels and a maximum width, and here I'm just going to take from this guy up here and type in 767 pixels. So you see how those line up, 768, 767. Down here for my minimum width, I'm going to put 300 pixels, and then down here I'm going to put 599. Since this is 600 and that's 599. And then I just need to change these, so I'm going to change this from 768 to 600, and then this guy down here is going to be 300. And that is going to point at all the different style sheets that we're going to need to use. Now what I need to do is come in here and actually build on inside of the HTML what I have here on the right side of my screen. Now I like to always use a wrapper around everything so that I have a background for my body, and then I have a background for whatever the wrapper is going to be around everything else. I'm going to go div class and then define my wrapper. Close that out, and then I'm going to close off the wrapper part, and then I like to come in here and say end of wrapper, just so I know where that is because that can sometimes get lost. Now that I have that, I'm going to go and mark up this guy right here, and I'm going to make this an aside. And then what am I going to put inside of this guy? Well, first I'm going to have to accommodate for my image, and that's going to be located in my images folder, of course, that I showed you earlier. And all of these files are going to be available in a link underneath the video in the description. I'm then going to give this an ID because there's only going to be one of them on the screen, so there that is. I'm going to call that logo, and let's give this alt text of new think tank logo. Well, then we have our navigation part of our screen, and I'm going to make this an unordered list, and I'm going to make this a class, and I'm going to give it just one name because I have no reason to give it two different classes, and I'm going to call this SP icon list. And now inside of here I'm going to have to create all the list items for all these guys right here, and I'm going to use a background to be able to put this inside of here, and then I'll have all these other different things. So let's go and put in a list item, and I'm going to want to target these list items both individually as well as a group, or at least I might want to do that. So I'm going to have a group class name of SB item, and then I'm going to have another one for first SB. So that's going to be the first thing in the sidebar. Then inside of here I'm going to create a span, and let's give this a class name. I can't think of any reason why I'd want to target these individually, so I'm just going to give them an individual list span name, and then I'm going to type in about. Now what I need to do is create 5 of these guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm just going to come in and change these to second, and then I'll change this to contact us. Change this to third, and that is blog. Fourth, videos, and fifth, and this will be podcast. Then underneath of it, before the sidebar ends, I'm going to throw in a div, and this is going to be for the social part right here. Whoops, this guy right there. Hopefully that didn't drive you crazy. Div. There's only going to be one of these on the screen, and then I'm going to call this social, and I'm going to make a span here. I'm going to give this an ID equal to social title, and let's just make that let's talk, just like it says. Close that span off. Then I'm going to need to put in some images, and so I'm going to go and put in just a regular image tag here. Let's give it a class name, even though I don't expect to be able to use it or need to use it. But I think that I'll probably edit these in exactly the same way. So I'm going to call these social icons. And then this is located again in my images folder. So we have Facebook IC for icon ping. And that's all I need to do there. And then let's go and copy this because we're going to need 3 of these. Paste that in there, paste that in there. And then for this guy, we're going to call this Twitter. And then for this one, we'll call this RSS. Okay, so we got that all in there. Oh, let's call this social icons, not social cons. Div and aside. So there's everything. That's everything that I'm going to use in my sidebar based off of the design that I have here on the right side of the screen. Now I come into my main content area, which is going to have that big giant image inside of it. There's main, and I need to put an image inside of here. And that's also going to be located in the images folder, and this is called eyes ping, and let's give this an ID because it's only going to be one of those on there, and we'll just call this big image for now. And then underneath of it, I'm going to have to put in this newsletter area where it's going to allow them to sign up for a newsletter. So I'm going to put a div inside of here, and let's give this the ID of newsletter. I'm going to put a span inside of that. Definitely going to need to change this. Let's give it an ID of sign up text, and then let's put our text inside of there. So sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date, da 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 da. Let's put the span, closing span down here so it looks a little bit better. Alright, so let's enlarge this a little bit because I can see what I want to work with here. Then after my span, I'm going to need to put an input box there so they'll be able to enter in their input or their email, so they'll be able to get this guy. But I also think that I'm probably going to want to put a span around this because I'm going to want to move this guy right here down here underneath this text whenever we get small enough. So at some point in time, I'm going to need that. So let's say span, and that's what you have to constantly do is think about the future. And very often what you're going to want to do is actually create the smallest layout before you create the larger layouts. But I'm doing it in the opposite direction just to be crazy. All right, and let's close off that span. And let's come in here. We need an input box, and that's text. And let's give it the name of email. And then let's give it a class name of email input. And basically what I'm doing here, I'm doing this layout out of my head because I think there's some value in doing things this way. Hopefully it translates what's going on in my head if that's worth something. Then I'm going to put subscribe inside of here, and the reason why is I have a special button design that I want to use inside of here that I'm going to mark up in CSS, and then that is the end of the subscription box. Alright, so now what I need to do is I need to create all these article boxes right here, and they're pretty simple. But I also know how I'm going to want to move them around and things on the screen. So I'm going to want to put them inside of a div, and I'm going to give them a class name of article block. Close that off. And then I'm going to create a specific div for everything that's going to go inside of here. So let's give that a class name of article, and then let's also give it its own name just in case I want to design them differently. I don't think I will, but it's in there just in case I do want to do it. There it is. I'm going to need to put an image inside of here, and that's going to be in the images first TN. That is the name of that picture that I have here, starting with this turtle. Not going to need to do anything else there. And then we're going to create another div that's going to have my title inside of it. And while I think I'm going to want to style the article title, well, I absolutely positive I want to do that. I don't know that I would want to style them differently. I can't think of any reason I'd want to style them differently. So I'm just going to give them one class name. The race is what that says. And then close that off. And then we have a final div, which is going to be like an excerpt. So let's just call this article excerpt, and I'll just throw some junk text in there. Here's a random picture of something, isn't it wonderful, blah, 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 blah. Then I'm going to need to basically copy. Let's just select all that, get that all organized again. I'm going to want to come in here and create 3 more of these guys. Might want to come in here and say something like where this is closing off at, end of that. Now I know exactly what I'm copying. 1, 2, 3. So there's 3 more of those. So here's the first one, and I'm going to call this second art. This is going to be second thumbnail. Change the title on that, leave that the same. Make this third art, change this to third thumbnail. Change the title for that, leave all this the same. This is going to be fourth art, and this is going to be fourth thumbnail. And then the final title is the benefits of being cute. Okay, so there you go. Just some random things I threw inside of there. And that is all the HTML we're going to need. So we got every single thing here laid out right there on our screen. Now we need to jump into the CSS and actually move everything into position. So here is the large CSS file. This is going to be the default. And what I'm going to do here first is define a couple things that are going to be document wide for every single article or every single element. Going to define my padding as 0 for everything, and that's what you do there with a star. Targets every element. And then I'm going to define box or border box sizing. And what this is going to do is whenever you define an element's height and weight, it's automatically going to fit whatever you have the border and padding inside of it. So the border and padding aren't going to bounce out and hit other elements. And I like to use that a lot because it makes things neater and causes or eliminates a lot of conflicts. Now I need to define what I want with my body, and I'm going to define my font size as 62.5%. And what that's going to allow me to do is do EMs, like if I go 1.4 EM, that's going to be equivalent to 14 points. Okay, it's just a little trick. I talked about it in my CSS tutorial or one of these other tutorials. Then I'm going to define the font family I want to use, and I'm just going to use Arial. I know it's boring, spell Arial correctly. And then I'll say sans serif. And then I'm going to, let's say I want to define a color. This is just taken from the logo that I'm going to use, so I'm going to just put this in here. So there, and 51, and these colors all come from the Wiki Colors website. That's where I find all these guys. So just type in Wiki Colors in Google and you will find it. Alright, so then I need to define my wrapper, and I'm just going to work my way up. And let's say that I want my default font size to be 16 points. Remember, it's 1.6 EM, and I'm just using that so it scales nicely. And padding, I'm going to say 2 EM for my padding. And margin, I want the wrapper is going to be inside of the body section. So what I want to do here is make sure that it is always centered. And how we center everything is go 0 and auto for the sides, and that's going to automatically keep the margins equal on the sides. And let's say I want to have the width be 990 pixels. Remember, we're targeting 980, so I'm just putting that in there. Might go back and change it. Background color, and the background color is just going to be white. And so far, I think that's all I need to do. And I'm just looking at this as a guide. So now what I need to do is put my logo inside of here. Now what do I need for my logo? Well, I don't know. Let's switch over and start looking at the website. There you can see it's kind of a mess. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do, let's just come in here to the logo. And like I said, I have all of this say in the description. Definitely going to want a margin on the bottom of this so we can separate the navigation from everything else. And let's just put this at 15 pixels. And let's just leave it at that because I need to do some things with the asides and the navigation and a whole bunch of other different things here first. So now let's see what we want to do. So we got wrapper, there is our logo, and then we have our items. Well, let's open up our image again. There is our little layout. See, this is 34 pixels. I'm going to want to put some space in here so that I have room for the background for that guy. This is a list, which means it's going to put little bullets everywhere. I don't want those bullets there, so I want to get rid of that. And then I see here I have 21 pixels between each of my list items. So let's bounce back over here again. Target SB-item, like that. And let's define its height as 34 pixels, just as my little diagram that I have here showed. And list style type, and we'll put none inside of there so we get rid of the bullets. And margin bottom, remember we had 21 pixels between each of those guys. So we might come back and change some things, but those are the things that are obvious right now. Looking at this again, I can see here the next big thing is there's 60 pixels between the navigation section and the little social thing we have down here. So I'm going to target SB icon list, which is the name of this SB icon list, that guy right there. So I'm going to target the entire navigation thing, and I'm going to give it a margin bottom. And this is how I work. Everybody's different. Nobody's wrong. I mean, if it works, it works. So I'm going to just put that in there, and I like to just, as I'm looking at the diagram, the numbers that pop up, that's what I deal with immediately. And as things change, I go and change things. So now I'd like to focus in on individual items here in my navigation. So I want to make sure that I get my little images to show up inside of here. Well, each of these guys has its own name. So there is first, actually this is in here twice. What's wrong with that? Let's get rid of that. Let's make sure that's over here as well. And yes, it is. See, I put about in here twice, so that's bad. So let's get rid of that first about. Now this is first SB, second, third, fourth, and fifth. So I want to target each of those individually, which I have to do because each of them has a different background. So I'm going to say first SB, like that. And I'm going to change the background image for each of these. So I'm going to go background, I'm going to go URL, and you can see these guys out here. So where is about? This is first sb.ping, that's what I called it. I'm going to bring that inside here, and here's the images folder. And if we jump outside of that, you can see there is index.html. I need to jump into the images directory right there. So if I want to jump back one directory, I just go .. and I go images, and it's first sb.ping, there it is. And I want it to be positioned at the bottom and the left side of the background. And then also, of course, no repeat, because if it would repeat it, it would get in the way of the text. And that is basically all I'm going to need to do for those. So I'm going to go and copy that, and I'm going to need 4 of these. And then I'm going to go second, SB, third, fourth, and fifth. And then change this. So this is going to be second, third, and I like to keep, see, this is the same name. I like doing that because it just works well in my head. Just little tips that work for me, they might not work for you. Just like to bring them up. There we go. Boom. And now we can see there is our background images, and now we need to move these guys into position. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's just move over here, and you can see this is called list span right there, and they all have the same name, so I can move them all at the same time. So list span, I'm going to say display. I want to be able to style the margins and padding on these guys, but I do not want them to act like block elements. So I'm just going to call them inline block. I'm going to put some padding on them on the left side to accommodate for our image we have here. Let's just put in 45 pixels and see if that works. I'm also going to put in a little bit of padding on the top, and let's just say 8 pixels for that. And the font size is way too small, so let's go and play around with font size as well. So 1.4 EM and see how that works. And let's reload it, and there we go. Now we can see everything's lining up. Looks about right, I think. Good enough. Okay, so we got our little navigation set up now. Now we want to go in and fix our social title. This guy, we want the let's talk to be above that, and we want a line inside of there, which we're going to use a border for that. So if we jump over here and look at that, here is social, and there specifically is social title, which is the first thing I'm going to target here. So that was an ID, so I'm going to put a hash symbol inside of there. This I'm going to display as block because I want to have a new line. Remember, I wanted a border on the bottom of this that was a dashed border, and that's 1 pixel dashed, and let's give it the same color as before. There it is. Let's just copy this and just use that because it's there. Paste that in there, and let's define the width for this guy. And if we open this up, let's see, what do we have here for a width? Well, we have 143 by 124. Okay, good. So let's go in there. Since I took the time to draw out all that stuff, it's going to save me a lot of time thinking, and I think it's a lot easier than trying to do this live on the screen. Let's say padding bottom of 5 pixels and margin bottom of 10 pixels. Okay, reload. Let's talk is in there. Jeez, that looks pretty good. I don't know. Do I want to change that at all? Let's say that I want to put a little bit of padding on the right side of them, just to separate them a little bit. So social icons, like that, and padding on the right side of each of those of 7 pixels because it doesn't look like it needs much. And there it is, just moved it a little bit. So that looks pretty good. Now I need to get my aside to float to the left side of the screen so that I can have the main section float to the right side of the screen. So this is going to be on the left, and then this is going to be margin right, and let's go 35 pixels to separate those just a little bit, just to see if that works. Then the main section is this guy over here, so we want to target main. And for now, like I said, don't know. I'm just working here, so not thinking too much. I'm saying, well, I don't think I need to do anything with main, at least not right now. I want to slowly work everything in here so that everything fits and looks good. And I don't know, there's something going on. Let's just keep on working. So I want to get this image right here, my big image. And remember, that's an ID, so big image. And I want to put a margin on the bottom of that, like that. And let's just say 50 pixels because that sounds about right. Then I want to target the newsletter section, this guy right here. This is probably causing the problem. So let's come in here, newsletter. Again, it's an ID. And I want to use a background again. Let's go look at this. See, this is what I'm going to be marking up. I want this to be a background image again. So let's go and make that a background image. Background, URL. And I'm going to need to go outside of the go to the root so that I can go into the images folder and newsletter -ic, and that's a ping file. And again, I'm going to put that in the bottom left side of the screen and no repeat again, just like before. My height, keep having to open this up. Let's just leave it open for now. 35, let's say 35, 34, something like that. I think it's the 34 inside of there because I think that's actually marked up wrong. Well, we'll change it if we have to. And then we'll go padding left and let's say 54 for this. Change it if we have to. And then we're going to want to position this subscribe span. Remember, I put a span around this part right here because I want to sometimes move it down underneath of here. So I'm going to position this relative so that I will be able to position absolute with that span later on so that I can move it around. And then margin bottom, let's just leave it the same as before, which is 50 pixels. That's what I had at the top, and that's what I decided to do there. And see 80 pixels on that, and reload it. And there you go, starting to fit in there a little bit nicer. Now I got to get this part fixed up, that little guy, and then I'm also going to have to put the button inside of there. So let's target the sign up text, and that has a width of 317 pixels. I know that because of how I did my markup when I was looking at that. I want to be able to add margins and such to this, but I want it to act like an inline element. Let's go and use a font size, and let's just say 1 EM. See how that works out. And margin right of 60 pixels, and padding top of 5 pixels. See that went to 3 lines. I want it to only be 1 line. So let's see if changing this to just 0.9 works. And it does. So now that is on 2 lines. Come back here. Do I need to do anything else with sign up text? Nothing that I know of. The email input, I'm going to shrink that down. Let's say that I want my height, which I had defined before, as let's say 30 pixels. And the width is the big one. That's 170 pixels. Margin right, let's say 30 pixels. Don't know. And reload. And there it is. It's a little bit bigger. I'm going to want to move this guy up here so that it lines up a little bit nicer. And now I got to get the button. I already had a button CSS, or I had the CSS for the button that I wanted to use. So I'm just going to paste that inside of there. And I cover this in my CSS tutorial. I add a radius to it and a whole bunch of other different styling. And then down here you can see I have a top gradient, and that is what I use. So if you want to learn more about how border radiuses work and gradients and all that, you can look at the CSS tutorial. So there we go, reload that. And there you can see it looks pretty nice, little gradient. Okay, so now I want to come in here to this subscribe span part. Start styling this guy. So there we are. And we're going to be positioning this absolutely, and that is so that we can line it up, or absolute, sorry about that, I said absolutely, and it came out on the screen. And I'm going to have the bottom of it be 10, and I want the margin top, let's try 8 pixels. Reload, and that looks close enough. Okay, so all I did was move that up. Remember, this whole entire thing is relative, and I moved that inside of there. So now what? Well, the article themselves, so the article. And I know that I want to, again, be able to work with margins and padding, but I want it to act like an inline item. So inline, block, there this guy is. I can see that I have 164 for the width of this guy. And let's see, so let's play around. There's the different margins and all those different things. So I just have to pop those in. So I go width, and let's say 164 pixels. See if that works out the way I hope it did. And margin on the right, Let's see if 16 pixels works like that said it would. Reload it. Ooh, not bad. Okay, there's a little bit of a gap over here. Let's say that I take this up to 166 and see if that completely fouls up everything. A little bit, doesn't it? Let's change it down to 165. Reload it. It's gonna want to be 164. Okay, it likes 164, so I'm leaving it 164. Alright, so now what? Well, the article title. We're basically just going to put some margins inside of there so that it lines up better. And so we'll go margin top, and let's just go 10 pixels because that's a nice default. And then we'll go margin bottom, and we'll do the same thing there, 10 pixels. See if that works. And then finally, I know what I want to do. I want that to be 166 margin, I know why it was throwing that off. This has a margin on it. Remember I put margin right on all those different guys? This right here, 16 pixels. So what I want to do, I want to go fourth art like that, and I want to go margin right just on that one thing. See, good thing I went and put that in there, and change that to 0 pixels. Like that, see, and now what we'll be able to do is come in here to the article part, change this to like 166 and see if that lines up a little bit better. Reload. Bingo. Now it lines up almost perfectly with that, and that's perfect. So this is perfect and that's perfect. And I did that by getting rid of the margin right on the last article. There you go, guys. There I marked up one page. Now I need to go in and mark up the other different resolutions we're aiming at. Okay, so now what we need to do is take what we had originally in our layout and transfer that over into our style 768 CSS file. So what do we need to change here? Basically, I just copied everything from the style large and put it inside of style 768.css. I'm not going to need to change any of this stuff. I'm going to not need to change the font size at all. The wrapper doesn't need to change except for this guy right here. I'm going to change this to 768. 768. The logo is definitely going to need to change because the logo went from being on the left side of the screen to being the top. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to get rid of that. So I'm going to just comment that out for right now. And I'm going to want to display that inline block. So display inline block. And that's all I'm going to do for that right now. The sidebar items are definitely going to change quite a bit. So let's come in here and look at that. And we can see the height is going to be somewhere in the 66 pixel range. Width is going to be somewhere inside of the 48 pixels range. I don't have that written here, but I know because I know how big these images are. List style type is going to be none. Margin bottom is going to change. So let's just go in and start changing those things. So we'll say the height, what did we say over here? 60, oh no, 66 between that. Okay, so let's just say 62 pixels for the height of this guy. Let's say a width of 48 pixels. List style type none, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to want a margin on this anymore, so let's make margin bottom equal to 0. I am, however, going to want a padding on my top, which is going to accommodate the icon that is now at the top instead of being to the left side of the screen. And let's say 50 pixels for that guy. Since I don't want it to go up and down vertically, but instead I want it to go side to side horizontally, I'm going to change the display on this to be display inline. And I'm going to want everything to be adjusted to the right side of the screen. So I'm going to put a margin on that. So we'll say a margin left, and we'll say 35 pixels because that sounds about right. Okay, so bounce over here, see how all this changes, reload. Now remember, nothing's going to change, it's only going to change, see, there we go. So now we got that. And we can actually shrink that down a little bit more, fit that a little bit better on our screen. There we go. So now we just need to move all this stuff into place. I'm going to get the entire list and change the margin bottom on this to say, let's try that 50 pixels. I'm also going to want to change the width to what I figured it would be in the markup to 540 pixels. And then this is going to display inline block. Reload, and there we go. Now I need to make the icons go above instead of to the left side of the screen. So find these guys, and here I'm going to say top and center. And there it went up there. We're just going to need to play around with that a little bit positioning wise. So top, paste that in there, paste that in there. So you can see I'm doing a lot of changes here, and it's not really forcing me to change that many different things. Now we come down here to the list span area, which are all of the individual words for all the navigations. So let's come in here. We're going to need to change those a good bit. They can still remain inline block. That's good. Padding left. Well, I don't want anything there now, so I want that to be 0 pixels because remember the icon used to be on the left. Padding top, 8 pixels. Let's see how that works. I don't know. Let's reload it and see what it looks like. And there we go. Snapped right into place, and it looks pretty good. I'm not going to fiddle with it. I think it looks good enough. This guy right here, I'm just going to get rid of it altogether because I don't think that I need it. So I'm just going to go into the social area. Let's just change this to social. And then for display, I'm going to change it to none, which is going to make it not show up at all on the screen. So we can get rid of social icons as well. The aside, I don't need to float that left anymore because it doesn't float left. The main section, well, that doesn't float right anymore because remember, we have that taking up all the screen space available. Big image, 50 pixels, that looks fine. I don't know, let's just go and see what happens. So reload, you can see that went away, and you can see that everything lines up perfectly. So didn't have to change that many different things. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a success. Looks exactly like the other one. So now we'll come in here and let's look at the last design that we need to work with. And that is this guy right here. And what we need to do is get rid of those icons altogether, and we'll move that inside of there. So let's go. And we're going to copy everything that's here and then go into Style 600 and paste that in there. All right. Once again, padding doesn't need to change. None of these need to change. The body doesn't need to change. The font, the color, none of those need to change. Wrapper section. This is going to need to change. Let's change this to 600 pixels. Might need to come in here and change the padding on this wrapper eventually, but I'm not going to worry about that now until I am 100% positive about what I want to do with it. My logo. I'm definitely going to have to shrink that down because it's getting to the point where it's just too big. So what are we going to need to do? Display inline block. That's perfectly fine. Let's go and change my height percentage lower, so let's say 76 pixels and a width of 84 pixels just to see if that works, and margin left, and we'll just reload that, and there you can see now we're getting smaller. So I'm going to need to move that over and move this over here and then get rid of those icons altogether. So let's go and move our logo over just a little bit. Let's change the margin left on that to -15 pixels and see how that works out. SB items, which are each of the individual items we have there. I'm going to get rid of the height on that guy. Get rid of the width as well. We don't have to worry about the icons showing up anymore, so I'm going to get rid of all those guys. And let's get rid of this padding as well, because once again that just accommodates the icons. There's no other reason for it. Margin bottom 0 pixels, that seems to be fine. Display inline, that seems to be fine. List style type none, that seems to be fine. Let's also come in and change the background, because remember we don't have background image anymore. Let's just change the background on that to none. That also means we'll be able to come down here and get rid of all these background images where we set those in. So let's get rid of those. There you can see that lines up okay. This of course is terrible. We'll fix that later though. Margin left, let's change that to like 14 pixels. And then this is going to shrink down and so forth and so on to fit everything else, to accommodate everything else. So we'll just leave that the way it is right now. The icon list itself, margin bottom 50 pixels, that seems to be fine at this point. We're going to have to change the width again on this because remember we're working with 600 pixels, so let's change that to 430. Display inline block, that's perfectly fine. However, I think I might want to take the size down on this text. So I'm going to say something like font size, and last time 0.9 EM worked well, so let's try 0.9 EM again. Reload, and it's starting to look a little bit better. Once again, this is going to change. List span, inline block, 0 pixels, 8 pixels, 1.4. Let's see if that works fine. Social is still not going to be displayed. Of course, we could have moved that around or done something else we'd like to do with that. The background image, now this is going to have to change. Let's 50 pixels, margin bottom. Let's just say that that's okay. And let's take this size down a percentage. So we'll change it to 570 pixels. So most of the screen, remember this is 600. Like that, and reload. And there you go, it's fitting in a little bit better. Newsletter section, don't need to change the bottom left, no repeat, that's all fine. The height, 34 pixels, that doesn't need to change the height, and there's nothing wrong with that. Padding left, 54, relative, and 50 pixels. That looks like that's fine so far. Sign up text, this is going to need to change. Let's take that down, the same percentage that we took everything else down, which comes out to 246. Inline block seems fine. Let's change the font size to 0.7 EM to accommodate that. Margin right, we don't need as much of a margin here because we're viewing this on a smaller screen. So let's take this down a lot. Let's take it down to 15 pixels. Padding top, that doesn't need to change. We're worried about the right and left. We're not worried about anything else. So let's reload that. And there you can see I'm starting to get more room here to be able to change and fit everything else. Email input. Let's change this height to 25 pixels and we'll change the width a good bit. change that to 150 pixels. Margin right. Let's change that to 15 pixels. See how that works out, and reload. See, I want that subscribe button to come up here, and the button, that looks about right. Maybe we'd want to come in here for the padding section just to give us a little bit more room. Let's change this to 10 instead of 15. See how that works. Ah, there it goes. Okay, so everything's on one line, so everything's awesome. Subscribe span, absolute, 10, 8 pixels. Nothing else looks wrong there, so why fiddle with that? Inline block, 166, 16 pixels. What I think I'm going to do, since this dropped down here, I'm just going to eliminate it altogether. That seems to be the easiest way to handle all that. So I'm going to come in here to fourth art, and I'm going to say display none. There that is, and reload, and now it went away. I'm back up here to figure out what else we're looking at. Subscribe span, article, that all looks fine, 166. We're going to change the margin right on this a little bit to accommodate the fact we don't have that other little guy there. See how that works? Article title, 10 pixels, 10 pixels. It seems to fit, so why fiddle with it? And third art, let's do the same thing we did previously with fourth art. Third art, right like this, and eliminate the margin right. Margin right, 0 pixels. And let's see how that works. And there you can see, it's almost perfect. Pretty much almost lines up there on the outside of the screen. So there you go, guys. That is my responsive web design tutorial. I leave it to you to go in here and create style-300 for homework. I know you can do it because I taught you everything else you need to know. Basically what I would do is I would just have each of these articles take up one line. So you either move the title and the text over here, and then have all those on individual lines. You could then do something like move the navigation into the bottom of the screen or the crop of the screen or whatever, and center the icon and do whatever you'd like to do with that. I could fiddle with this a little bit more, but I think you guys get the gist. And if you guys have any interest, maybe in the next tutorial I'll do a responsive web design with a fluid layout. So please leave your questions and comments below. Otherwise, till next time.